I'll be doing another tier list. You know, I had fun with it last time. Today will be a shorter one. You know, I talked last week about how I want to do some fun ones, some silly ones, some serious ones, some short ones, some long ones. So the one last week, I did all the keywords in the game. So that one took a little bit of a time, and it was a lot more of an investment. I made a whole like slideshow presentation to go along with it. This one's a lot more simple. I'll just be rating the Excavate treasures. So I'll be going through them in order: common, rare, epics, then the legendaries. I talked about it last week during my tier list, but I think I rated Excavate an A or an S. I can't remember, but I like Excavate a lot. I think it's a really cool mechanic. It scratches that like random itch, but it's controlled randomness in a sense because each rarity only has 6 options, right? So while it is random, you can, you know, kind of play around or I guess hope for certain outcomes. And the legendaries are pretty cool for the most part too. I'll go down the line from common onwards. First off, the names are small here. We have the Escaping Trogg. It's the 2/3 rush. I think this one's just fine. I don't think it's quite A territory. But yeah, the Trogg is just fine. It's almost like matchup dependent or even deck dependent, right? Like sometimes it's A tier, sometimes it's C tier. So I think average on it's like a B. It's fine. The Fool's Azerite. So discover a 2-cost card. It costs 1. Actually, like all 3 of these, I feel like are almost A tier. I feel like it's A. You know, they usually you get at least one good option out of them. The fact that it costs 0, like, you know, you're getting some tempo there because you're getting a higher cost card. I do think out of the 3, this is the weakest one, but I think they might all be A's. So the next one up, we have the Heartblossom. Give a friendly minion +2/+2, deal 2 damage to a random enemy minion. This is one of the ones added in the mini set, and it's, again, fine. Also matchup dependent. Some of these, obviously, in some situations are better than others. Like, I'm never not happy to see the Trogg. Even this, you know, worst case scenario, if they have no minions on the board, it's still a 1 mana +2/+2, which is fine. And if they have a minion on the board, it's huge. So similar to the Trogg, this is an A sometimes, but I'd say on average it's probably just a B. The coins, I think, are a C. Basically, pouch of coins, 1 mana, get 2 coins. You know, the idea is that you have a turn with like 1 extra mana that's just going to waste, right? And you open the coin pouch, and then next turn you can ramp 2, right? But I feel like 99% of the time, you're essentially just playing this right away and playing the 2 coins. So it's essentially just like an extra coin, right? So I think the idea is cool. You know, those turns where you can afford to, you know, you have the 1 extra mana, you kind of prep the coins, and then the next turn you ramp 2. Sure, that circumstance, it's really good. But like I said, like 99% of the time, I find myself just popping the pouch, popping both coins right away. Like essentially just treating it like a coin. So in that sense, I don't think it's very good. I don't think it's like D tier. It's still like a free coin, I guess. We'll see. Maybe I'll go down to D. But for now, it's C. It's not great. We got the Rock, deal 3 damage. I think that's A tier, personally. Like, the fact that it can go face is relevant. You know, 1 mana, deal 3 damage is already very, very good. You're basically going to kill any 1 or 2 drop, and it can push face damage. There's plenty of times where I've used this on an opponent's face to finish them off. You know, say you have any kind of spell damage or anything like that, it's even better. So, yeah, I think the Rock, very good. Like, and especially, like, I guess... especially me, right? I play very slow, control-y, grindy decks. So I usually I want removal, right? I'm usually trying to keep down the opponent's board. So I'm pretty much always happy to see the Rock. I might drop this down, actually. I'm going to drop this down because I'm going to put the water in A tier. Me personally, if I'm getting a common Excavate treasure, more than likely I'm hoping for the Rock. Again, for the types of decks I play, I'm hoping for either the Rock or the Rock. I can't talk. I'm hoping for either the Rock or the water. I'm either hoping to remove a threat or I'm hoping to stay alive a bit with the style of decks I play. Coin just kind of sucks. And yeah, like I said, sometimes Trogg is A tier as well. Sometimes it's C tier. I think it just averages out to a B. Same with the Blossom. There's times where it's better and worse. I think it just averages out to a B. And yeah, I think some of the other Azerite might be A, but the 2 cost isn't that crazy. I think that's it for commons. Like I said, I'm usually always hoping for Rock or Water. Moving on to the rares, this is where things start to get a little more exciting. There's some really good ones here, and there's one not so good one to me. But next up, we have the next Azerite item. So we have Azerite Chunk. Discover a 3-cost card. It costs 0. I think this one's A. I don't think the 2-cost one it's still fine, but I think the 3-cost one is pretty good. Canary is a tough one. Canary is another one of those ones, because some of these are very situational. So like the Trogg and what is this called again? Heartblossom. Trogg and Heartblossom, there's matchups and there's situations where they're A tier and there's times where they're C tier. So I think they just average out to a B. I feel like Canary's the same. There's been times I've got Canary and it's like game winning. But then there's other times you get Canary and it just does nothing. So I feel like B is just kind of like averaging it out. It's basically a 2-mana sap on a 2/2 body. I think if this could target your own minion, I wonder if that'd be too strong. If it could target your own minion, I think it'd be A tier. Because it just makes it more flexible. You know, there's times I've got Canary in like control matchups and there's just nothing to bounce or nothing worth bouncing. I guess the way I'm evaluating the cards is when like I said, based on the decks I play and based on my play style, when I trigger that Excavate, what cards am I hoping for, essentially? Like I said, I'm just going to move these, but for common, like I said, I'm usually hoping for the rock or the water. Based on the fact that I'm usually playing control, grindy decks, those work out the best for me typically. These 3, they're just fine. They're not bad. Sometimes they're great, sometimes they're not so great, so they kind of average out in the middle. And the coin is just forgettable, not that great. Maybe this is an A tier, now that I think about it more. I think the 3-mana one is A tier for sure. Because I guess I'll just say right off the bat. So for the common, the ones I'm always hoping for are the rock and the water. For the rare, I would say the 2 I'm always hoping for are the Geode and the Stalactite. So the Geode is the next one up. By that logic, I would say it's also A tier. So 2-mana 1/2 at the end of your turn, deal 2 damage to all enemies. The fact that this hits their face is a nice little bonus on top. Like it could not hit face and it would still be good. So the fact that it does is great there. But like I said, considering I play a lot of grindy decks, I play control, I want to clear the opponent's board, Geode is an amazing card in that sense. And then you have Falling Stalactite, 2 mana, deal 3 damage to a minion and the enemy hero. So it's basically like a double rock, you know, it's hitting the minion and them. Again, I like removal, so that is also A tier for me. Like I said, those are the 2 I'm wanting to hit on rare. Like I said, if Canary could hit your minions, I wonder if that'd be too good. Because there's been circumstances where Canary just sits in my hand. Because, you know, there's either nothing to bounce or nothing worth bouncing. But if it's your own minion, you know, maybe you can double up on a Battle Cry or something. I wonder if, like I said, I wonder if that'd be too strong. If it could hit your own minion, I think that'd be A tier as well. But for now, I think it's just B. Maybe I should clarify these. So these A's I want to get. The B's, they're fine. And C's I don't want. At least on my current rating so far. That's basically what I'm doing. Also, they're fine, not dying. So yeah, the A's so far, these are basically the cards that when I'm triggering the Battle Cry, when I'm excavating, those are the cards I'm hoping to hit most of the time. Next, we have Glowing Glyph. Give a minion and its neighbors +1/+2. Personally, I hate this one. This one might be D. I think this one's D tier for me. Based on the decks I play, I never want to see this card. Every time I ever excavate this card, I'm always upset. And I understand, right? For some decks, like Paladin and stuff, I'm sure you're so happy to get this card. But for me personally, in the types of decks I play, I hate getting this card. I think this is my least favorite Excavate treasure by far. This is probably the only one that's going to go in D tier because I never want this card. Like, at least the coin does something, but the glyphs does nothing for me. So that is D tier. I never want this card. What if we want here? I make these consistent. Always want. Sometimes want. There. These cards, I always want them. These ones are fine. I sometimes want them. The C, I don't want it, but I don't hate it. D, I never want it. We're going to have some C tier, S tier stuff, right? So I'll do that. Always want. Usually want. We'll do that. So like I said, the way I'm rating these is whenever I'm playing Excavate, whenever I'm generating these cards, basically which ones am I hoping to roll? Oh, then we have Living Stone. Living Stone, just another B. It's fine. It's not bad. Obviously, you can high roll this two cost sometimes. There's a big variance on 2 costs, right? Sometimes you get something really shitty, sometimes you get something really nice. So it kind of fits in the themes of like the B tier here. I feel like pretty much all of these cards in the B tier, they have situations where they're an A and they have situations where they're a C. but then they just average out to a B, right? While these cards I feel like are always just A's. I'm always happy to see them. These, sometimes they're great, sometimes they're not great. So they just kind of average out in the middle. Now we'll move over to epics. Things start to get a little spicy. We have Azerite Gem. Discover a 5-cost card. It costs 0. I feel like I don't want to just make all the epics A tier. I would just put this in B, I guess, still. Because like it's good. Don't get me wrong. Like discovering a 5-cost card and it costing 0, it's a very good card. But I feel like there's other cards here that I want more. Don't interpret this to mean that it's not great or that I don't want it. But there's just other Excavate, epics I want more. For instance, Collapse. Deal 3 damage to all enemies. I feel like this might be the first S tier. Again, for the decks I play and the way I play, Collapse is always good. I'm always happy to hit Collapse. And there's actually tons of times I'm like excavating and I'm hoping to hit Collapse. Like I would say out of all of the epics, Collapse is probably the one I hope for the most often. So I think it's an easy S tier there. And if you, like I said, if you're catching a theme here, anything that it acts as removal or like helps me survive, right? Those are usually the ones I'm hoping for. Next up, we have Motherlode Drake, another very, very good one. I wouldn't quite say it's S tier, but it's A. Simply because, getting the Drake into a board-based deck, amazing. I guess I can make the argument, right, that sometimes this is an S. If you get this into a board-based deck, it's amazing. But if you get it into another control deck that's just doing nothing, it's kind of B tier. So I think it averages out to an A. Never unhappy to see it, but there's situations where it's better or worse. Ogrefist Boulder. Memes aside, I think it's just a B. Or is it even C? Basically, I play very control-y decks. There's a lot of times where, because don't get me wrong, in some decks, this card is very, very good. Just like here, I have this card in D here. In some decks, this is like an A or an S tier, right? But based on the decks I play, I don't always have a minion on the board to buff up with the location. Or if I do have a minion on the board, generally its stats are as good as a 6-7 or better. A lot of the minions I'm playing in my decks are 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 cost minions that have big stats already. So if anything, you might use it as like a pseudo heal, trade into something and then use a location to give it back to full health. But yeah, generally, I don't really want this card. Next up, we have Steelhide Mole. Again, B tier. I think my logic, again, with all the B tiers here is there's times, like, if you hit the mole against like an aggro deck early on, it's great. It's super, super good. It's very sticky. They can't easily get rid of it. It's a lot of stats. But against other decks, it's a C. It just doesn't really do anything. So averages out to a B. Like, don't get me wrong. There's matchups and times I've gotten the mole, and I'm very, very happy to get it. It's like on the same level as the Drake in some matchups, but then other matchups where it's not so great. So I think it's just in the middle. Averages out as a B, I think. World Pillar Fragment. So funny enough, World Pillar Fragment, discover an elemental to summon and you add the other 2 to your hand. This was one of the ones added in the mini set. And for whatever reason, I feel like I never get this card. I feel like I can count on one hand how many times I've got this card. So it's too bad because I haven't really got to like experiment with it too much. Because obviously there's some crazy high rolls with this card, right? Like, I don't think it's C tier. It's a solid B, right? Like, it's a 3 mana. More than likely gets you like a decent minion on the board and puts 2 more in your hands. Like, it seems like a decent amount of value for 3 mana. Like, I feel like it's pretty comparable to the Azerite Gem, right? The Azerite Gem, you're paying 3 mana, you're getting a 5 mana minion on the board. World Pillar Fragment, you're paying 3 mana, probably averaging out a 5 or 6 mana minion on the board and also getting 2 more in your hands. I just think my lack of exposure to it, I don't think I could put it up in A. I just don't know if it's that good. Like I said, I don't know. I don't know if it's just bad luck, but I feel like I've never get this card. So at least on paper, it seems like a B. It seems fine. So now we'll move over to the legendaries. Not all of the classes got legendary treasures, unfortunately, which on one hand, it's a bummer. But on the other hand, like, I get it. Not all mechanics are going to apply to every single class. It's happened many times in the past. We'll start off with the Paladin one. Give all other minions in your hand, deck, and battlefield +3/+3. It's funny, before rotation, I kept saying that after rotation, I thought it was going to be played a lot more. This wasn't really played before rotation because there was just so many good Paladin minions. But since rotation, Paladin still has a lot of good cards, but less of them. So it's easier to fit the Excavate package in there. So this card is being played quite a bit more. I'm not really a Paladin player, but I feel like it's an A tier. It doesn't like make the deck. The deck is still very strong without it, but it just, you know, maybe it can be considered like a win more card, but it's still, when you consider the amount of stats you're getting from this one card, I think it's very good. The Azerite Hawk is the mage one. It's Battlecry, get a random Titan that costs 1. In terms of fun, it's like A tier or S tier. In terms of good, I think it's B tier, simply because of like the random aspect of it. You know, there's been times I've played this card and you get a Titan that's like amazing for your situation and saves you the game. Obviously, the value for 4 mana is very, very good, but you know, there's times you want to get like Sargeras off it, right? Or you want to get Yogg off it, and you get some trash Titan. You get like the Mage Titan or whatever. Yeah, I think, yeah, if I was to like rank it in that sense, it'd be like low B, high C. I don't think it's quite bad enough to put in C. If you're playing this on the defensive and you need like a certain Titan, it sucks that it has the random aspect. It would have been kind of cool if it was, you know, discover a Titan and it costs 1. Like, yes, it would still be kind of random because you're only getting 3 options out of the whatever 14 or 13. If this was discover a Titan, I think it'd be a lot better. But let's go B tier. Azerite Murloc. It's funny. I'm kind of torn on this card because for the longest time, I thought this was like D tier. And I still don't think it's great. But I did play an Evolved Shaman deck with this a couple weeks ago. And it was pretty fun because the reason this card isn't great is the battle cry. If you were to play this with Shutter Block, you would think that it would evolve the cards in your hand and your deck by 9, but it doesn't because it keeps their original cost. You know, say you have a 1-drop in your hand, right? You play Shutter Block into the Azerite Murloc. It evolves the 1-drop into a 4-drop, but it still costs 1. So then the battle cry triggers again, and it still sees it as a 1 cost, so it evolves it into a 4 again. So yeah, if it worked the way you think logically, it would be a much better card. But and so funny enough, the deck I played, I guess, so what I explained, that's what happens to the cards in your hand and in your deck. If you triple the battle cry, they'll only evolve once. It just basically re-rolls the evolve 3 times. But the exception is the cards you have on the board, it actually evolves them +9, which is weird, right? So the cards in your hand and your deck, it evolves by 3. The cards on your board, it evolves by 9. And that's because when a card on the board evolves, it now has the cost of that card. It doesn't keep the old cost. So it's a really weird interaction. The deck I played basically involved flooding the board with like 1 and 2 cost minions and then tripling this battle cry because then it would give you a bunch of big stuff on the board. But your hand and deck doesn't really do anything too. So because of that, I think I'll put it up to C. If it worked the way you think, I think this could be as high as like A tier. But I've seen a lot of threads on Reddit talking about how they wish they would rework this battle cry to work like you think. It's weird that it affects your hand and your board differently. So yeah, if it wasn't for the board aspect, it would just be D tier simply because of that. But I think the fact that you can triple the board bumps up to C. The Azerite Ox. Try not to be biased because Warrior's my favorite class, but I think this is S tier. Obviously, hitting this with Bran is amazing. It's so many stats, especially when you hit things. You can hit Ragnaros, get the immediate effect. You can hit the one guy who rushes and returns things to your hand. Like, there's so many good options from the discovery here. Even without hitting this with Bran, though, it's still a very, very good card. Like, this is literally a win, like one of the win conditions in Warrior decks. So for that reason, I think it's S tier. Like the Paladin one isn't really a win condition, right? It's kind of like a win more card. Like it needs setup, it needs follow up. This card can just be played by itself and win a game. The Azerite Rat, resurrect your highest cost minion, give it +2/+2 reborn and lifesteal. I think this one, if we're also talking like win conditions, I think is also S tier. The amount of damage this one card can do if it resurrects the Rexa. Yeah, like this evolving Rexa is just insane. You know, you're You're trading into multiple minions, you're stealing multiple minions, you're healing a bunch, all for 4 mana. So this is a huge swing card that can just turn a game in your favor. Maybe this gets bumped down to C then. That is true, that either you don't have hand space for the 2 extra minions, or you do, but then like you're burning cards your next turn. That's true, actually. With how much card draw there is in the game right now, I think this gets bumped down a bit. That's a good good point there. But yeah, like I was saying, the Azerite Rat, for 4 mana, it's like, obviously it's a little situational in the sense that you need Rexa to die first. But there's been times I've resurrected the Primus with the Rat, and it's been great. So it's not like you need Rexa to die for the Azerite Rat to be good. There is multiple targets you could hit with the Rat to make it very good, but it's for 4 mana, it's crazy the swing you get. You know, you're usually healing a bunch, you're killing multiple things, maybe stealing multiple things, all for 4 mana. Just like the Azerite Ox, this is like a game-winning card to me. So I think it's also S tier. Next up, we have the Azerite Scorpion. Before we talk about it, I think it's just A tier. Simply because it's like so random, right? Don't get me wrong, it's a fun card. You know, I love fun cards and decks like this, but because it's so random, it's very high rolly, right? There's been times I've played the Scorpion and it's like won me the game. There's been times where I play the Scorpion and it does nothing, or it plays, like I get spells that either like actively hurt me or I just can't even play. So it might even be B tier actually, because following that logic, it's pretty similar to the Hawk, right? There's sometimes you can play these cards and they just win you the game, and there's other times where they do nothing because of the random aspect. So I think actually, now that I talk about it, for that reason, I think both these are B tier for the same reason. But in terms of fun, it's like S tier. I think it's a very fun card, and I like effects like that. So last but not least, we have the Azerite Snake. Battle Cry, your hero steals 7 health from the enemy hero. And I will say, you know, as a player, I think this is super cool. I think this is a really unique win condition. It's a very unique deck, but playing against it is miserable. I agree 100%. You know, I think this is a very cool deck. I'll definitely have to go back and play it some more. Like I said, it's very unique, right? We haven't really had a win condition like this as far as I can think of. Not to mention, it's just like a very unique deck as well, right? Like how often are you throwing in like Brewmasters and bounce effects into like a legit deck? I think it's A tier. I think even after the nerf, I think it's still like a tier 2 deck, or maybe tier 3. You know, you can definitely win games with it. It's not going to get you to legend, but it's, you know, you can get to diamond with this deck, probably diamond 5 with this deck, I think. It is a win condition like these guys, but it's not as good since the nerf, but it's not as unreliable as these ones. I think it's A tier. It's a cool card. I think it's a super cool card, but like I said, I understand the frustrations with this card 100%. There's a handful of decks and cards that I think are super fun to pilot, but miserable to play against, and this is one of them for sure. So I understand why they nerfed it, especially since it ignores armor, right? But yeah, it's fun. And I like Warlock. But yeah, I think that's where I'm at. You know, the Warrior and the Death Knight legendaries are like game winning. Very, very good. Collapse is game winning in a way as well. Rock, Water, Geode, and Stalagmite. And the Drake, very good cards I'm pretty much always hoping for and can swing games. The rest of these, the Bs, are just fine. Cs are kind of bad. You know, Coin, it's a coin. Boulder Fist doesn't really work for the types of decks I play. Same with the Elemental. Azerite Murloc, because of the way it works, it does have to go down to C. You know, if they were to change the card, I think it could be A tier. If they were to change it to actually, like, if you tripled the Battle Cry, it would work like you think it does, I think it'd be A tier. But for now, it's C. And yeah, the Glyph is D tier, because I never want to see that treasure. At least, like, these 3, they're not, usually I can get something out of them, but this one is usually just bad. Yeah, that's where I'm at. I think Excavate is a super fun mechanic. I think it's one of the cooler, more interesting ones they've added in a while. So we'll be sad when it rotates, but luckily still around for another year.